Okay. Yes, thank you very much for having me up here. Thank you, Jerry. Just met you this morning. It's nice to have a contact. Thank you also to Paula and Janie for facilitating up here. And also a thank you to Dara, who is with the Michigan State Medical Society, who I believe is a sponsor of this event, in addition to him. Is that correct?
I failed to mention that, so if I could just give me 1 second. So part of, being able to afford to do what we do here and do what we do down the street there, we solicit sponsors for this. So HIMSS has both chapter sponsors who are able to help us with that. And then for this event, the Michigan State Medical Society insurance practice. So they offer cybersecurity insurance for providers. So if you're in need of that, there's some brochures for that in the back as well. So thank you for keeping me straight.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay, so I was asked to present on updates and trends in healthcare cybersecurity. There's a couple of things going on, and that's what I'm going to cover today. As always, I'm here to answer questions and help with anything like that. So I always like to start out with the learning objectives so that we know what we're getting into today. The first thing we're going to talk about is phishing. I can tell you, last week we had an almost successful phish at our organization. One of our accounting management actually went 3 or 4 times back and forth with someone who wanted a wire transfer in the amount of $87,000. Why they went beyond the first message, I honestly don't know. And it was management, it wasn't just an accountant. So, but anyways, phishing it's real. So we want to make sure we are talking about the different types of phishing, look at the risk with it, and look at some countermeasures. The next thing is medical devices, which since WannaCry or WannaCrypt in May, those have gotten a lot more attention. Not a lot to report on that front, but there's a little bit. So I did stick that in here also. And then the next thing would be ransomware, which we're all pretty familiar with that. A new strain out just this week of Bad Rabbit, they've called it. Different things that are going on there. We'll just look at some of that. And then at the end, just some recommendations, general recommendations for protecting your general or your healthcare data. So, phishing, the definition's up here. Most of you in the room, if you're IT professionals, are probably aware of phishing is when, somebody fraudulently tries to obtain information from you. They're trying to pose as someone. Not only does it go on in the business world, it goes on in the personal world. I don't know if you're aware of the related operations, but whaling operation, really, really easy to do. You go on the web, you search a Form 990 from the IRS, you get the top 10 or 15 corporate officers for any nonprofit organization. It's not hard to figure out email addresses. You can usually get them off somebody's webpage. So you know who their president, their CEO, and all of their top people are. Information available just like that. Spear phishing, clone phishing, and smishing. Okay, those are all different things that go on. One of the most successful phishing attempts that I've seen is, so a year ago, you guys moved into this building here. Did you have to send out a parking map? That was a phish attempt that somebody did on someone. They knew from the community information that someone was going to a new building. They attached a PDF that was purported to be the parking map. Everybody opened it. I hate to use links in emails anymore. I mean, it's unfortunate, but when they're getting that good about it, how do you know the difference? The other one that we ran into a lot is caller ID spoofing. I don't know if you guys are getting into that up here or not, but it's so easy to change the caller ID. I mean, you download a program on your iPhone or your smartphone, and you can change the caller ID. We probably get, I'm going to say at least one of those a week, where somebody's spoofing one of our numbers and calling out, not so much coming in, but pretending to be us in healthcare and calling patients. So, you can't stop it. You can only educate people. So those are all things that I consider to be phishing. So the risk associated with phishing. obviously the biggest one is the exposure of the credentials. You know, once somebody has that, they can go in, they can pretend that they're you. Financial loss, I kicked it off with that, the fraudulent wire transfers. But another one is loss of productivity. You get one of those emails loose in your system, if people start replying to all on it for some reason, you're losing a lot of productivity there. So it's not just what they're trying to do when it comes in, but it's also losing actual company time of stuff that people do. If you're doing any loss calculations related to phishing, don't forget to include that. If you're getting any type of insurance reimbursement or anything like that, don't forget your staff time in there. Denial of service attacks. So that's the reason for the traffic jam picture up there. Denial of service, if you're not familiar with it, is where someone floods the pipe either coming into or going out for your internet service. Okay, so that's another thing that can happen with a phishing attack. Remote support schemes. Phone call to the front desk or an office nurse about an urgent virus that needs to be removed. We got hit with one of these at Munson. It was someone who we had hired on from a private practice. They were not aware, we didn't do really good onboarding education. They were not aware that we had our own internal help desk. They let somebody into their computer for about 15 or 20 minutes, unfortunately. They only knew better when somebody asked for their credit card number. So, has anybody here had any forensics done on computers? Hired Dell or somebody like that to do it? We were going to have that computer forensically analyzed. The price tag, $18,000 to have one computer looked at to see if somebody actually, you know, had gotten into it. I spent quite a bit of time actually doing a risk assessment on the computer myself, but I mean, we had another incident within a month of that, and the price tag was even higher on that computer. So, are you guys familiar with the Ponyman Institute in Traverse City? I don't know if anybody's familiar with that. Dr. Larry Ponyman's known internationally, and he does independent research on things like this. If you're ever looking for any information for presentations, he does have, the reports are publicly available, but $3.7 million a year for a 10,000 employee. So, you know, I don't know how you want to break that down to a size, but to me, that was a lot of money for phishing for only 10,000 employees. So what can you do? What are your countermeasures? There's a lot of free resources available, and 37% of things that happen are actually a result of human error. So even though we want to block things coming in through email and stuff like that, we really need to get to the end user, because that's the biggest thing. There's a couple of websites up here. The other thing that I have in back is I have a list, and it's very small, but I will make it available electronically, of a lot of these resources that people can use if they want to get to stuff. SAN Securing the Human's another good one. You can actually, there's a poster back there that I brought that you can actually print out if you want and put on we take them when we go out and do our security risk assessments, and ask to put them in every physician practice, every one of our own practices at Munson. We've got about 100 of them, and we ask to put those in the employee break room. All it is having to print the poster. We don't have to design it, we just have to print it. So, policies, simple, clear statements about what's allowed and what you can and can't do. IT support is in here again. I had talked to you just a little bit about the remote support scam. Reminder notice and external email, if you're able to do that. If you get email from any of the big places downstate, maybe you're already doing this, and it's from an external source, it automatically says at the top, reminder, this is from outside our system. Do not open it unless you know the sender and are expecting it. So, that email that we had where they were trying to get someone to do a wire transfer, they used one of our former managers that hasn't been at Munson for 4 years. That's what it looked like in the from email. Only when you looked in the header of the email could you see that it was a Comcast account. So anything that comes in externally, you know, this email originated outside of. I know for a fact, like Beaumont Health, Spectrum, and University of Michigan for sure, anytime we get something from one of those folks, they have that in there. Two-factor authentication, if you're using that for your electronic prescriptions for controlled substances rule, if anybody's doing that, see if you can ramp that up for your administrative accounts or something like that. So if you have it to meet a certain requirement, bring it in to help with the other stuff. Okay, next up, medical devices. So legacy technologies, WinXP or older stuff like that, that's why they're at risk. And we all know we can't patch them. We can't even scan for them probably, because when you scan for them, what happens? You have a risk of taking them down, so you impact your patients with them. Another big one, the hard-coded service credentials. I know we have a lot of this at Munson. When I talk to our medical device manager, they don't call them admin accounts down in medical devices. It's service accounts. You go to the service thing for the Siemens device. There's your login ID and password. You can't change it. So that's another thing. People want to argue with me about whether medical devices are considered to be, something with protected health information we have to protect, but I haven't found anything to the contrary. And then the other one is something that's really interesting related to the guy from Beaumont that I work with, Scott Larson, a lot. And it is the outdated or close dated technology. So if you're buying a medical device and you're going to depreciate it over the next 5 years, and you're buying it right now with Windows 7, how long is Windows 7 going to last? Beaumont has been able to successfully go to those medical device manufacturers and say, you know what? You're going to sell this to me with Windows 10 or I'm not going to buy it. So that's one of the things we could do. We could band together and do that kind of stuff. It's really hard when you're small and you need that device though. Obviously, the first thing here is do the best you can to isolate those devices from the internet. Turn your vendor accounts on and off if you can. Whatever you can do. They have those hard-coded credentials. You can't change the credentials. Segmentation is your technical term for that. And then if you need to relay that to your people that are, in the field and they don't understand it, it's similar to a medical practice, keeping the contaminated items from the sterile items. So you have to keep those things separate. That's kind of like segmentation. So HIMSS has a nice page on medical device security here. It's also in the links. The next one, limit the amount of data stored on the actual device. So if you're collecting data on that device for a year, but you could be cleaning it once a week and that device gets breached, you're going to end up, if you're cleaning it once a week, maybe with a small breach. But if you're cleaning it once a year, you might end up with a large, more than 500 breach. So just limit your exposure to those type of things. The FDA, obviously they got the message this spring. Mayo Clinic and the University of Michigan are also, they're all working on that. University of Michigan, Dr. Kevin Fu, I don't know if anybody here has met him. He has a place for medical device security. They actually have a conference and they actually work on it. He's one of the forerunners. There's a resource in here, Mayo Clinic checklist, before they bring their medical devices in that they do. I don't know what you folks do for risk here, but if somebody wants to buy something at Munson and it does not meet the HIPAA requirements, and they say they have to have it for a business need, we have a waiver form. I state the HIPAA requirements in it. The vice president signs off on it. If it has financial information, like if it doesn't meet the payment card industry, or if it has a HIPAA information, other people in the organization have to sign off on that. So if we're buying these devices and they're not meeting certain requirements, we make a waiver form be signed. Next up, ransomware. Probably pretty familiar with it. Somebody gets your system infected, it locks the system up, and you can't do anything. famous ones up here, especially, you know, the Heritage Valley Health Systems in Pennsylvania. That's your medical device there, your MedRad device, used to assist in MRI scans. Nuance dictation services. I don't know if anybody up here experienced that in late June, but they were down for a long time. I did see in news in the last week or so that Congress has called Nuance to actually testify as to why they don't think it's a breach. Nuance doesn't think it's a breach of protected health information. FedEx obviously got hit by it, and then Bad Rabbit this week. There was two in the last week where a practice in Missouri actually paid the ransom to get their data back. And if anybody in the room is familiar with Hollywood Presbyterian, that kicked this all off back in, I think it was May of 2016, after being down for 18 days, they also paid the ransom. So these people are getting money from people. That's why they keep doing it. Bitcoin. I did a little bit of research on Bitcoin. It's really interesting when you start looking at, and I'm sure the FBI knows a lot more about this than I do, but when you start looking at all that works and the fact that the Bitcoin, you pay somebody and it's not traceable and stuff like that. Of course, it's a lot of the whole dark web thing and, you know, the Onion router, or the Onion network, the Tor browsers, TOR browsers, short for the Onion router. But what I thought was most interesting is when I did my research for a presentation about a year ago on that, they actually said that there were some people that ripped off somebody else's Bitcoin. So in other words, the two bad people were ripping each other off and they couldn't tell themselves who had ripped them off. And it was to the tune of over $1 million. So I thought that was interesting. The risk, obviously they make the amount go up as time marches on. Business interruption expenses, not knowing who's on a schedule, not knowing what you're doing next when you don't have that data to get there. Threat to post the data publicly is a reputational harm. And the potential for HIPAA breach reporting. And so there's a link here, which you may know about, which is written documentation from Health and Human Services about ransomware. And it basically states that if it becomes encrypted and you don't have the keys to unencrypt it, that you need to do a risk assessment, and it's probably a breach. So that's why I think the whole Nuance thing is pretty interesting. I know some people were without transcription services for 7 to 10 days. And some people that I've talked to through the Michigan Healthcare Cybersecurity Council actually lost 48 hours of transcription because of bad backup practices. So how can that not be a breach? It'll be an interesting investigation. One of the things that I always talk about when I talk about ransomware is disaster recovery and business continuity. So this diagram up here may not mean a lot, but when you're in front of a bunch of physicians and you start explaining to them, so the little green square is your normal business. The red is obviously when you get hit. The yellow is when you're recovering, and the green is when you're back to normal. So then we talk about having a plan and defining the actual time, and there's technical terms for all of these, your recovery point objective. So how long or how much data can you afford to lose? That's what that first one is. Your recovery time objective. Okay, how long can you take to recover? If you can only lose 5 minutes worth of data, but it takes you 3 days to recover, if you start having conversations on all of these types of things with folks. And then your actual recovery time. And the big thing up here is your maximum tolerable downtime. So when you start talking to people and putting a picture like this up here and finding out that they have never really thought about that they might lose data, they don't necessarily want to dive in and take it on themselves, but they understand a little bit more when you want to spend time on something like that. So, a call to action. some things that have went on recently that just, to me, it makes it universal what we're talking about here. But Lincare, which is a national company, $239,000 fine for unauthorized exposure of 278 patient records, paper records. Somebody doesn't want to spend money on stuff, it's a pretty big fine for 278 records. What about the next one? Children's Digestive Health, $31,000 for not having a timely business associate agreement. We struggle with business associate agreements, right? I constantly am trying to get my supply chain people to say, you know what? If you're bringing it in, just like we need to check and see if there's a budget category for it, we need to see if these people have an appropriate business associate agreement. And everybody has a business associate agreement that they want you to sign. They don't want to always sign yours. So, some of the deals you can get on the dark web, and this is from a report from Dell SecureWorks. $7 for a remote access Trojan, $40 for a bank account with a $1,000 balance, $90 for a new identity package, and $127 for the access credentials to a Twitter or Facebook account. So because we're able to use our Facebook accounts or our Twitter accounts to log into so many things, I use a little program, Waze, W-A-Z-E, to get me to every place I need to go. I can log into Waze with Facebook. I talk to medical students when they come to our place, or residents when they first start. I have a little Jeopardy board I go out and I do with them. And I say to the students, do you understand why Facebook is up there? Because that's the highest one of all of them. And they don't even think about it. Well, once they start understanding that Facebook is not just Facebook, but it's a lot of stuff in the universe, they start guarding it a little bit better. The other thing I always joke about with the whole medical students, you know, medical school is not cheap. So we're trying to figure out how for $90 we could get them a new identity where they could actually like have their loans stay with their old identity, but they could actually put their MD or DO with their new identity. We haven't figured that one out yet, but it's always an interesting conversation. So it just amazes me, some of the stuff that's out there. So, and then this one here. And this map is available publicly. It's nothing that I've went through any special privileges and got, but, and it's from 2014. I did put the date down here, so it's a little bit older. But when I see things like this, I realize that nobody's on an island, even remotely up here. I mean, I can't tell you who these people are, but I can tell you, I'm pretty sure Traverse City's on that map. I don't think that's Petoskey. And it really looks like you guys are on that map too.
Yep, no, front and center.
So now, what I've had some people say when I do this presentation or a presentation is I'm moving to North Dakota because there's nobody on the map from North Dakota. That's exactly what people say. There's nobody in North Dakota. So that's why there's nobody there. But I mean, and obviously, I mean, I don't have intelligence and things like that. I'm a member of Infragard, which is the FBI thing. You know, and I work with the Michigan Healthcare Cybersecurity Council, so I don't have a whole bunch of intelligence, but when I saw something like this, I'm like, this really brings it home. So, my number one recommendation, if we're not doing it already, is an annual security risk assessment with remediation. I have practices that call me in Traverse City, and they're not our own practices, and they want to know what to do to have better security. The physicians don't think it's important. We're still running XP in 2003. They don't think it's important. So one of the things I've did, Grand Traverse County, where Munson Medical Center is, they had a very bad IT report, over $6 million to fix the things in Grand Traverse County, and it's available publicly. So when a practice calls me and says, my doctors don't understand why it's not okay for us to be on XP or why it's not okay for us to be on 2003. I say, well, go look up that Grand Traverse County report that's a public document and sit down with your doctors and have a conversation. At least see if you can get them to do a security risk assessment. Tell them it's like an annual physical exam. you know, they want their patients to come in so that they can take care of stuff. Tell them it's that. Quote here from the HIPAA security rule that states that a risk analysis is required. Fun part about it is it doesn't say frequency and it doesn't say exactly what a risk analysis is. So one of my colleagues from the Cybersecurity Council, actually there's a couple of them if you go out there, that HHS wall of shame people call it, where people get to put their breaches out there. There's a couple of the bigger systems downstate that are on there. This system is in the middle of an audit with the Office of Civil Rights because of one of their breaches. And they shared with us the prescriptive stuff that they got from OCR about having an inventory of all your PHI. They're failing their PHI inventory now because they don't have the written or the hard copy. Where are all your hard copy records? Not just where's your electronic stuff, but where's your hard copy stuff? So they shared that, and it's pretty prescriptive what's in there. So typical cost, you know, the other thing is there's this security risk assessment tool if you're an IT professional, and you can download that and you can use it on like an iPad, or you can also use it on a Windows machine. If you're a bigger organization, it might not work because I think you have to like have a different folder, unless they've changed it recently, but you have to have a different folder for every one of them. But if you know anybody who's looking for a small tool, if they're able to actually interpret it, because some of the language in there, it's not like you could, I can't tell if I have a sore throat. I don't have the, you know, I don't have the background to do that. Does someone have the background to actually go and fill out that security risk assessment? They can get the tool, but if they don't understand what they're getting asked, it's not going to be a good thing. So. Another recommendation, make sure that you incorporate education and that you document it. So when you have a breach and when somebody comes and does an investigation, that's what's going to help you on the end of the fines. And if you're actually into like the willful neglect and stuff like that, if you can prove that you've been trying to do something, you've been trying to educate people, even if it's just printing out one of those phishing posters and, like I said, talking about it for 5 minutes at a staff meeting and then having a 5-question quiz, you can prove that you're trying to do it. It's going to help you on the back end. The same thing with the documentation. Keeping the technology up to date. I mean, this one goes without saying, downloading security patches, antivirus. I don't know if anybody, and I'm not here to push any products, but one of the things we're starting to use on some of our older machines is called Cylance. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that. It's an artificial intelligence, not a signature-based antivirus. So it isn't like you have to download the signatures. When it starts doing things that aren't right, it starts protecting the machine that way. But it's Cylance, C-Y-L-A-N-C-E. It's like a next generation antivirus. Make sure your software is actually HIPAA compliant and not HIPAA capable. This is something that I see a lot of smaller practices get into. So you buy a software and it's HIPAA capable. Great, I'm ready to go. What makes the software HIPAA compliant is actually going in and configuring the password stuff, or actually going in and making sure that you have individual logins for someone. So people will think HIPAA capable means good to go, check the box. No, HIPAA compliant is what you're looking for there. The next one, your administrative accounts. Boy, that's huge. I believe the latest recommendation out of NIST, the National Institute for Standards and Technology, I don't know if anybody references NIST here, their common security framework, but is to have separate administrator accounts. They also have some interesting stuff out on passwords that it's going to be a challenge to implement that for us. And then what about cyber liability insurance? So we have cyber liability at Munson, and we've actually used them. The $18,000 example I quoted, we called them when we had that problem, and they got us with Dell to get that quote for the forensics. But, you know, we've actually called them, find out what it is, find out what you can do for it. You don't necessarily, if you call one of their call centers, you're not necessarily filing a claim. They have those call centers and they have those resources available so that people can get through this. Filing with, I think we've probably called them, I'm going to say 15 times in the last 3 to 5 years, and we've never filed a claim once. We've never had to, but it's separate to those two things. So, and it can be an add-on, especially for smaller stuff. So, this is a quote from a guy who I actually connected up with on LinkedIn. He's a global chief information security officer from Paris, France. And I like it. The fact that it's much more than a matter of IT. Everybody wants to say, oh, you're the cybersecurity person, you're the information security officer, you're going to take care of all of it. No, it's a partnership. Okay, it's a partnership between myself and an analyst, or myself and a physician, and the people and the processes and the tools. I mean, that's the most important thing right there. So I think with that, any questions or comments from anyone?
Why don't we hold the questions?
Okay.
We'll let Ken do his presentation, and then we'll do kind of a, maybe you guys might want to, play off each other on the questions and answers. So
Okay.
you might have differing opinions on the question or the answer.
Okay.
All right. Very good. Thank you, Linda. Appreciate that. Ready to go? Again,
We'll just have to use this.
Ken Zimmerman from the FBI Task Force here in the Detroit office. So now you're probably going to have, we don't have the,
All right.
So you'll have to just
Got it figured out.
Yep.
work it from there.
Okay, so Ken Zimmerman. I've been with the FBI Cyber Task Force in Detroit for over 4 years now. I work national security and criminal computer intrusions, and my area of response is pretty much Lansing North. So I do have business cards here. If you guys want to reach out to me after this today, by email, by phone, whatever, you have something that might be of interest to us and we can help you guys out, definitely make contact with me. And I love finding a way to get up here to the UP. So, and I do apologize if I'm not on my game today. I have a third baby, and she's a month old. And last night she decided to stay up all night. And then I left Lansing at 5 o'clock this morning and drove all the way here. And if I didn't have my brother-in-law in the car with me, I probably would have had a tough time getting here. So thank Dara for having me here. Today is the DeWitt Cross Country Regional, and I'm one of the coaches, and her son also runs. So I won't have an opportunity to see them run today, but I enjoy these speeches, coming out and talking, because I like to develop these private sector partnerships. You guys are the subject matter experts of your systems. You provide us with the indicators, all the information we need that we can sometimes share with other companies to prevent further victimization. So again, thanks. So a little bit about the three-letter agencies and their cybersecurity responsibilities. DOJ, FBI, and we do national security and criminal intrusions. We are the guys on the ground here in the U.S. that can prosecute criminally computer intrusions. The DHS, they more focus on the energy sector, the power plants, our water grid, anything of that nature. DOD and NSA, those guys protect us from abroad. They provide us with a lot of intelligence information that they're able to dumb down into lower classification to share with us that we can sometimes share with you guys. So a lot of the information you get if you're like an Infragard member can come from any of these agencies listed above here. A little bit about the FBI at a glance. Right now we have over, I think it's up to like 4,800 cases now active. We do have dual authority, which allows us under Title 18 to charge and investigate criminal computer intrusions, the national security, Title 50, the FISA, the 702 coverage, surveillance on non-U.S. persons, that sort of thing. We have 56 field offices. Every field office does have a cyber squad, legal attaches, we call them legats, all over the world, and with agents embedded that work with foreign governments, foreign law enforcement, That's why in computer intrusions, a lot of these things lead overseas. We're able to serve legal process overseas using our legal partners and agents over there, and we do get pretty good information in return. This year alone, we've already 80 arrests. A little bit about what you see here. NCITF is just a conglomerate of law enforcement partners that pump out intelligence to anyone that's a member, I guess. Good way to put it. Cywatch is our 24/7 operations center. They take calls. That number, that email, you call them, let them know you have a computer intrusion. They will reach out to the field office in that area of response and get someone from the FBI to help you guys with what you're dealing with. The IC3, I don't know if anyone's used that system before, but it's an online complaint center. You can fill out, it's going to ask for a lot of information, your name, your company, what you have going on, whether it be just a DDoS, a phishing email, maybe some account takeover activity, anything that may be computer intrusion related. Eventually, someone will get that complaint, and I would hope that the field office agents that are assigned that would reach out and make contact with you. Detroit, RAOR is the entire state of Michigan. I don't know anyone there that wouldn't give you a call if an IC3 complaint came through them. Our CAT team, these guys are the best of the best of the FBI. They have helped out on numerous massive intrusions around the world. I don't really know if I can talk about which ones they've gone out on, so I'm just going to leave it at that. If you have a really bad intrusion, we can get these guys to come in, and they're amazing. So Infragard, if you remember, you're going to see information like this: private industry notifications, flashes, public service announcements. These indicators that you see here, these come from victim companies, and they allow us to share them anonymously with other companies that are members of of Infragard. So if you can find a way to become a member of Infragard, there are some benefits to it. There are a lot of conferences that you can attend that are free of charge. The government pays for. They can really help you guys out on better protecting your network. I guess that's who's doing the hacking. Sure, if you've been through this conference or through one of these presentations before, you've seen this, but you've got the hacktivists that just want to push their political agenda. The crime, you have the ransomware. They want to get that money. They want to get that data that they can sell on the dark web. Your insider threat, that's typically with the companies that hold a lot of proprietary information. The insider threat is your biggest problem, and I have seen insider threats quite a bit. So the guys on the inside, definitely also folks that you need to keep an eye on. And then our nation state actors and warfare. I'm sure you've all read about Stuxnet and what went on with that and the Iranian centrifuge program that was running there. And I hit the button wrong. All right. So this is an example of how bad guys get on the network. They do recon. Your social media presence is what they utilize to find out who you are, who you work for, and how they may be able to get in. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that good stuff. LinkedIn is a big one. They want to compromise. They'll do that via phishing, SQL injection, any number of methods. They want to get that foothold, get into your company, try to find a way to move laterally, get those admin credentials. Munson rep here explain that in detail. And they're using legitimate services to transfer data, encrypting that data so you don't know what they're taking, and they're getting a lot. And this is typically what we see in a computer intrusion. Adversary is over here in China, And they will utilize a hop in Europe to then access another hop in the US and then attack the victim company. From there, they'll use that shared service, that Dropbox type platform, go through South America, hit the Middle East, and eventually get back to where they reside at. Very common. We'll see 20, 30 hops with each intrusion, though it's not that simplified most of the time. Types of attack that we're seeing today, the false tax return filings are huge right now. We are seeing folks that go to use TurboTax and file their income taxes, find out that they've already been filed, and then they got to go the paper route. And I guess it takes 6 months to a year now before they're getting those returns. But you will get your money. The government just takes the loss for that. Ransomware is huge. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And the theft of the PII and PHI. I think we can say, though, that with the latest massive security breach, everyone's PII is out there now. So what is ransomware? I'm going to avoid getting into all this because it's already been spoken on, but I will say that since I think 2011, there have been 7,500 ransomware cases. $56 million have been paid to bad guys. I know of hospitals and other small mom and pop doctor's offices that have had their computers locked down. They've paid the ransom. We will never advocate at the FBI to pay a ransom because they can always not give you what you need, those keys to the kingdom to unlock your files again. They will just ask for more money. I've seen that in multiple cases where you pay 40 Bitcoin, which is going for around $4 grand, I think, right now per Bitcoin. You think you get everything you need, they give you 10 keys and they say, if you want the other 40, we're going to need another 40 Bitcoin. So it is, once they know that you're willing to pay, they're going to try to leverage more money from you. Who are they ransoming? Anyone that needs access immediately to data at the hospitals, police departments that may need to get into files on traffic stops, on individuals that are going to court, hospitals, patients, meds, anything that you need access to immediately. That's what they want to. That's what they want to lock up. So how do we protect our systems? Well, we patch, and we will always recommend that you patch. It is unreal at how many folks are still running Windows 2003 and XP, and they are just opened up to the world. And backups and keeping your backups offline. We throw another individual slide in there on backups because it is critical. If you are infected with ransomware and you have good backups that are not tied to the that are offline, then I mean you don't have to pay. That's the easiest way around it. So a little bit of case study here. So you know that we are catching these guys. Is back in 2014 we did indict 5 PLA Chinese officers for numerous computer intrusions in the U.S. They were going after our power infrastructure. They were going after our finances. They were automotive, energy, anything that they could get their hands on, they were stealing. So those guys were indicted. It is a name and shame game. It makes the Chinese look bad, and those guys can now never leave their country and go to a friendly U.S. country where they can be extradited. The 2015 attack on the Ukraine electric grid. I don't know if they have announced publicly who they think that is, but I'm sure if you did enough open source research on Google, you would probably get a pretty good idea on that. But I think it knocked out power to over 200,000 people, and it was for a substantial length of time. 2016, we had the indictments of the 7 Iranian actors that did the DDoS attack on the financial network in New York when Wall Street was open. I believe we're looking at 50 billion in losses on that. It was an astronomical number. and maybe it was 50 million. I don't remember right now, but one of the guys identified in that actually was able to access a SCADA system to a dam in New York, and his attempt to take the dam offline and potentially cause a massive flood. But the dam happened to be offline for its annual maintenance for 30 days, so they couldn't access any of the controls there. But he did successfully access that system. Equifax, I think rumor there on the on one of the servers was that someone had used admin for the user ID and password of one of the databases. So I think that was a South American country too. I'm not sure on that though. Comey, our former director there, said that there are two kinds of companies in the U.S., those that have been hacked and those that don't know they've been hacked by the Chinese. The Chinese, they're in the news every day. We see that. They want everything. It's obvious with some of the news reports here going after our airlines, our military secrets. It's all there. They have a 5-year plan or a 5-year goal. I think the 13th 5-year plan was just recently published. It's on the internet of what they want, and they're going after everything that alternative energy, biotech, autonomous vehicles, hydrogen vehicles, and they want it all. So if you decide to call us, you have a computer intrusion or you have something minor, it is you want to get the FBI involved. It may or may not be something that we would open a case on, but with the Cyber Task Force out of Detroit, we have partners, task force officers that are with the Michigan Cyber Command Center. So if we can't open up something federally, we could probably get one of our task force officers on the state side to open up something on the state for you guys. And also, we have other local offices, or local PDs that we can reach out to them and they can help you out too. If it does expand beyond their jurisdiction, which typically it does, we can always provide assistance on moving further with some legal process with that. One of the things that we tout, going back to the Sony hack, and the reason we talk about Sony is because Sony lets us talk about Sony. We don't want to further victimize a victim. If you do call us, we know that you're very concerned about being in the public eye. You may not know how large or small your intrusion is. So we meet off site. If you don't want folks in your office knowing that the FBI is coming in to take a look at something, we'll meet at Starbucks. We will do everything out of band for you guys to keep that privacy there. One of the things that we will always ask for is images, logs, anything. So if you don't have good logging or don't know if you log at all, turn those things on, because you'd be surprised at a number of intrusions that I've gone to, and we ask for logs and they don't even know how to access them. And then when they do learn how to access them, they learn that they're only there for 12 to 24 hours. But we do get good logging with a lot of companies too. We've had logs that go back 2-3 years. It's been pretty awesome. But we have a lot of analysts and a lot of experts in our agency that have a lot of databases that they can start plugging in the information from your logs and see if we can find out who these guys are. So you want to contact us early on. I do forensics for the FBI. I go out on scene. I conduct memory captures, full disk images. I do live response. So if you can get us out there before you pull the plug, that'd be really great with our investigation. A lot of malware now, and I'm sure you guys that are in this field, a lot of malware resides in memory. So getting that memory capture, if you're virtualized, take a snapshot. That VMM file is pretty awesome too. So develop those relationships. That's why we're here today. Get involved in Infragard. Start talking with other companies in your field. Develop that incident response plan. Test the plan. Make sure it works. Patch management, 2-factor authentication, strong passwords. I see this more and more on these computer intrusions. We'll get a file. I don't know if it's if it's common IT practice, but I would say the last half dozen intrusions that I've involved that have included user passwords and IDs being stolen. The password was changed to fall 2016, winter 2016, summer # 2016. Last 6 intrusions, I've seen the passwords, and it's like, wow, is that common? Is that something they teach you guys? But it's pretty entertaining. So that's all I have. So can't think of anything right now that I could add to that. So but that information is there for you guys. I do have some cards if you want those, and I'll take any questions.
Okay. Thank you very much. Can we get a round of applause for our speakers? And we'll bring Linda back up, and then we have a couple of questions in the chat box, but we can start right here and see, you know, who has questions. Yep.
Can you speak a little bit about some of the intrusions that have happened in healthcare? And, you know, we have our HIPAA security and privacy laws, and we're trying to follow all guidelines for that. But when people have those types of breaches, it doesn't always boil down to they were trying to use the medical data. And I was wondering if you could speak to that, of how maybe those people get in because they're not focusing on that part of it.
So I see a lot, I shouldn't say I see a lot, I haven't seen a lot of healthcare intrusions, maybe a dozen in 4 years. A lot of it is ransomware. It comes from the phishing email that would appear to come from the head doctor at the small practice. And then some computer intrusions that I've seen with that is, for some reason, the head medical physician of that small practice sees that it fit that he have you know, super user rights to the computers, and they give them to him, and then they get compromised, and they've got their admin access that way. Phishing plays a big role, and I think the fact that some of the staff and some of the doctors of their own, it's small scale with what I see, because I deal with a lot of the small businesses, the family practices, not so much the hospitals. A lot of hospitals a couple of the hospitals that I've dealt with have massive IT teams and are pretty proactive in what they do. And but they're just, I would say, I think I saw back there on a flyer, it's saying securing the human. They're not securing the human. They're just clicking on everything that they see because, you know, it's not, it's the administrator, it's the secretary, you know, oh, there's an email from the doctor, you know, not expanding out those headers and actually seeing who that email is coming from. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what I see a lot.
So are there resources that, like, let's say our organization, the Healthcare Solutions, can provide out to those smaller practices that maybe give them a checklist or something like that? I mean,
I don't know how much you participate in Infragard, but Infragard does do a lot of trainings to its members, and sometimes they offer those trainings to its members' employees. That would be something to look at. I know that if you have some contracts with, I'm just throwing them out there, but it may not necessarily be like Dell Secure Works. They might provide some training or some slides or something that would help you out. There's a lot of, you know, SANS is huge. I don't know if you've heard of SANS,
yeah, right.
but I think they do a lot of good things. They have a lot of stuff on their website that you could download and just share with your staff and have sit downs, let them know that there's just a few things that you could point that could be pointed out in some of these intrusions that we see on how they get in. And it is, you know, how to scroll over and, you know, who the email is coming from to see who the email is actually coming from, because it may look like it's coming from your boss, but it's coming from some Yandex mail server or a mail.com or a .ir or a .ru extension. So
I can share with you one thing we do in Traverse City that might be successful. We have what's called a HIPAA roadshow. And we actually have a person who's a semi-retired, she's actually a registered nurse. And we offer that where they will go, it's through our physician services area, and they will actually go free of charge and sit down for a half hour before the office opens at 7 a.m. They'll show up and sit down with the staff for a half hour to talk to them about stuff. Part of the reason we do it is because we have a lot of connections. They're not all through an HIE type thing, but we have, since, you know, you guys up here are a lot like us. When I talk to my partners in Detroit, you know, there's 4 hospitals in a 10-mile radius. For us, we allow people from private practices to access certain data like lab results and stuff like that. They're connected to us. If they're not connected right, they're going to infect us. So we've taken that as an extension, and they call it the HIPAA roadshow, but it could be the security roadshow. And I mean, even just a half hour of people who, you know, have knowledge about the top 3 things, because all the phishing education we try and do, it seems like people will click, click, click forever. And I'm telling you, it's our highest level people that click through the most of them. And just like you said, they're the ones who think they have to have the admin or God access. I mean, they, you know, they don't understand that. So that's something that's worked well for us.
and it always seems to be, no matter how much training you give somebody, it's always going to be about a 10% that are going to click on it. So you could tell them the day before that they're going to you're going to do a phishing test tomorrow, and 10% of the people will still click on that
That's
email.
probably what we had.
So
We had an intrusion detection and about 10% clicked on it.
On the chat box, they asked if you're asking a question, maybe if you could talk
Oh,
a little bit
repeat it.
louder,
Oh,
and
yeah.
then maybe if the
could
people who
repeat.
answered could just kind of summarize the question.
The other thing I will share with you that from Munson is the Hollywood Presbyterian incident that I talked about. We received 15 of those emails at Munson. We had just changed to a different email filtering system. McAfee was what we had. Again, I'm not here to promote anybody. We're on Proofpoint. I was very, let's say, skeptical of it. So I went to the email administrator and said, I want you to prove this to me. And the fact that that actually updates the information automatically saved us, because those 15 emails were not delivered to any of our in people. And so I know there's gazillions of security tools you can buy, but that's one we invested in, and it paid off very well for us.
Dan, did you have another question?
Well, I was just gonna ask if part of your roadshow had a component for the social engineering aspect of it to watch, you know, in the offices, because like you said, it's those people who are busy all the time that they probably don't, they're a little bit more trusting, let's just put it that way.
Right. So yeah. So the question was, does our HIPAA roadshow in Traverse City include social engineering type stuff? The HIPAA roadshow is mainly about protecting health information. I shared it as an idea for up here, but it's mainly about sitting down with people and saying, no, you can't access your kids' records. No, you can't figure out why your neighbor's in the hospital. It's mainly that type of thing. But you could do the same type of thing for the other. So we don't speak specifically to social engineering on it. But I mean, all you have to do is, you know, your insider threat thing's something I totally missed, but it's so true, because if you Google Blue Cross, I think 28 people down there were like getting social security numbers and all this other kind of stuff. I think that was the agency downstate a few years back, and they were actually, I mean, unless you guys have clean rooms, which I'm in here with my cell phone, people can take pictures till the cows come home. I mean, they
You
can.
got the guys down in Washington that work for TIA Craft that were selling PII of retirees' benefits there. So, I mean, yeah, the insider threat is real. Regarding social engineering, send me an email. I do believe I have something that the FBI put together regarding some social engineering training. I can provide that. Yeah, Proofpoint's good. Cylance is good. think the FBI has contracts with both of those companies. So
Yeah, I mean, the silence thing.
but Cylance is really cool. I've had a lot of malware go undetected, and Cylance has found it. So
Well,
it's just slow.
sorry, I don't mean to step on you.
That's fine.
You know, Cylance brought the patch out right after WannaCry to do 2003 and XP. So if we do have some legacy devices we cannot get rid of. We have segmented them the best we can, but I tell you what, we have Microsoft AV for most stuff right now, and we have Cylance for the things that Microsoft can't or won't protect, including our Apple devices.
And a lot of this ransomware is getting in through RDP too. So if you have RDP turned off, you've killed 90% of your problem.
So neither one of you really spoke about this
Mhm.
or these devices. This is becoming a bane of our existence of how people can either keep PHI on these or text PHI on these, or so can you guys speak a little bit about that and maybe some of the holes that people don't think about when they have the cell phones attached to their hips?
Yeah, open Wi-Fi, turn it off. I mean, I can't take my personal cell phone into the bureau with Wi-Fi and Bluetooth on. I get it's a security violation. You get in big trouble. So I mean, that's kind of always the practice I live by. I turn it off unless I'm at home. But yeah, that's the biggest problem that we see, and especially with all the new. I haven't looked into much detail in it, but I have been reading up about the wireless vulnerabilities that are out there. Bluetooth is, it's exploitable. That's about as far as I can go with it. Is that people think that because they're in Big B, and I'm not putting Big B out there because it's Big B, but I do like their coffee. You go in there and Big B has the guest Wi-Fi, and I was actually at a vendor roadshow recently where I spoke, and an individual there had a pineapple, and he was part of another. He was one of the vendors there, and he was capturing everyone's cell phone information. The Mac and so forth. And that's, I actually discovered there that with the new Apple update, when you turn your Wi-Fi off, you actually have to go into the settings to turn it off. You can't just push the button anymore. It still stays on, and he still captured my phone. But even with the latest iOS update, it still is like that. So yeah.
So it just pretends it's off, but it's not?
Right. Still scanning.
Temporarily disconnected from the network.
So the one thing I can tell you on that is we're working on high trust certification. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, the Health Information Trust Alliance. We recently, we started the questions under 8.1 and we went to 9.0. 200 more questions under 9.0 and many under mobile. High trust is something that you can go out there and you can download it free of charge. You don't have to pay any fees for it. And I'm telling you what, if you want prescriptive stuff related to anything in healthcare, I mean, they will give you, about mobile devices, so many questions about them, about whether you're able to do remote wipe, about whether you actually have a good inventory, about what you're doing about, allowing software and stuff on them. I mean, question after question after question of things for you to think about. So you can get it as a PDF. It's 9.0 right now if you go to the High Trust site. And we're just really trying to do more of a virtual experience with it and not let people have data on their phones at all. But the other thing for us, which is the actual just people bringing them into your facilities. And, we have strong policies, and, it's like, if you see somebody with their phone out and they're taking pictures, even if it's somebody they know, we get people involved. It's just so many things. I mean, the background can just, that can be a HIPAA breach for you.
Yeah, for employees, definitely your use policy is going to be your kicker there. If they sign something saying that you can confiscate their phone at any time due to the fact that they're tied to your network at any time, that's gonna motivate them to be a little more proactive on making sure some of those features are turned off or that they're a little more careful on what they're doing on their phone. So, but it's all through policy. So, gotta get admin on board.
Now, a lot of the growing trends are going to the cloud, and is that something that you're putting a bigger bullseye on your back? A lot of the hackers are looking at these cloud services, or is that something that, rely on their security and it's better than?
Yeah, I'm interested to see how all that's going to.
Could you just summarize it?
Oh, so it talked about cloud and cloud security and what issues we see with that. Pretty much summarize it. Yeah, I'm interested to see how that's going to go because we don't really deal a lot with the cloud stuff right now. Massive intrusions of those services. Amazon, Google, whoever else might be, HP, whoever else might be hosting those type of services. We haven't really had a lot of exposure to that. So I'll be interested to see how that works when a company has all of their data exposed from a cloud service and where that goes.
So do you not see that because they've not reported breach incidents, or they're so big they don't want to report them because they don't want the negative publicity?
I know that there's been the blame comes from both sides, or the big side just decides to remain silent. So then, in some of the contracts that are being signed with these, it's putting the responsibility back on the company themselves. It's not putting themselves back on the big cloud storage company there. So I can't speak for other guys that I work with on the squad and what they've seen. And we actually did have a session yesterday on reference cloud, and I wasn't able to be part of it. So yeah, I can't add anything to that today. So
The couple of things that I can add is number one, BAA, Business Associate Agreement. It's not going to keep you from getting breached, but it's going to protect you. How many people here, if you're using Microsoft, especially for Office 365, have signed a Business Associate Agreement? If you haven't, you want to make sure you do that. The other thing is, at the Michigan Healthcare Cybersecurity Council, we're just starting to look at CASB. I think it's short for Cloud Access Security Brokers, and how those actually do and don't work. One of the biggest challenges that we found as a Munson healthcare institution is the fact, and I know Marquette has clinical students here from like the Michigan State University College of Human Medicine. Those students have to have access back to, I think it is Google Drive, okay? We want to start blocking cloud services, but there are so many business processes involved in that we haven't been able to get our arms around it. In May, I did a survey, I sent out a survey to people that I knew through the internet logs actually were accessing cloud services. Over half of the people came back to me and said, why are you asking me about this? I don't know what a cloud service is. And I even identified in there, like Dropbox and Google Drive and things like that. They still did not get it. So do people even know they're doing it? But I mean, definitely get that BAA in place to protect you if they're not going to sign a BAA. The other thing, the whole other side of that is we have a vendor right now that has stuff outsourced to India through cloud services that we really didn't even know about. So it's not just us, it's the vendors too.
Linda, there's a question came in from Dara remotely. She wanted you to talk about the Cybersecurity Council and then how people here that are on the webinar or in the room could benefit from any of the work that the Cybersecurity Council is doing.
Okay, so the Michigan Healthcare Cybersecurity Council was formed back in 2013. A group of people from a bunch of hospitals got together, a lot of the bigger hospitals, and also the state. There's some people from the state there on that. We've been meeting quarterly, and we only meet in person. We all sign non-disclosure agreements and stuff like that, but to talk about cybersecurity. Just this year, some people stepped forward and said, we need to do more about this. And two of the people that stepped forward is Jack Gafal, who's the CISO for Michigan Medicine at the University of Michigan, and Scott Larson, who's the Senior Operations Manager for Beaumont Health for cybersecurity down there. So Scott and Jack, Scott's from up here, I want to say Negaunee. Jack's from Iron Mountain. They're like, we need to do more as a council to help these people, not only in the UP, but in the state. This is a state thing. This isn't the 20 biggest people in Michigan. So Scott, Jack, myself, and Keith Teresco from Privacy Associates formed a 501c3 corporation. And we're right now where we're just pulling together our executive board and our board of directors. But our goal is to be able to reach out to people throughout the state with education. I've talked to Dara about what we could do for maybe a webinar for people. I've heard people say, you know, let's look at disaster recovery and business continuity. Let's look at your security incident response team plan. What can we do to help people out with stuff like that? So Michigan Healthcare Cybersecurity Council, we're putting the ink behind it. I don't have a ton of information on it right now because we're just trying to get this thing pulled together. If anyone's ever did a nonprofit corporation, there's a list this long. And remember, this is not our day job. This is what I do in the evening when I'm staying up. So I could certainly look at getting the information to people to get out. The other thing, Jerry and I met for lunch and we said, you know, how can we work through HIMSS to get this out too? So that's what the Michigan Healthcare Cybersecurity Council is. It's a wealth of information and just stuff like I talked about with the, you know, the OCR audit and the one facility sharing with us. This is this prescriptive stuff we received from the Office of Civil Rights about why our inventory is not passing muster. So any questions about that, Council?
Okay, what other questions do we have?
For cybersecurity insurance, have you known anybody that's actually had to go and hit that to cover their costs for IT, for recouping their environment, that kind of stuff? And, or do they, is it typical insurance, do they fight you tooth and nail and come into your environment and say, oh, we got this reason to deny you, we got this reason. I'm just wondering how valid it really is, and you've never collected on it.
Yeah, I don't know of anyone that's personally collected on it. It's interesting. My brother works for an electrical contractor, and for some reason they haven't had access to their files for almost 60 days. I don't know why. I haven't heard a lot about it, but they are going to make a claim against their, I guess, business continuity. I don't know if it's a site reliability. So I honestly don't know anything about claims experiences with it. I would encourage you to look to them for education also. Beasley is who we're with right now. That's the insurance company. Willis is our insurance broker. Willis Watson, they actually have people in Chicago.
Our sponsor.
Yeah, MXMS has it too. Part of the reason I'd encourage you to reach out to them is, and again, I'm not promoting anybody, but we actually get our privacy officers together once a year on site at a central location. And they actually flew somebody in from New York to do something on our incident response, one of their experts. So those folks, you know, they have resources too. And I would encourage you to look at, you have a
With
list?
health plan,
Yeah. Yeah, you have Willis?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know if you, you know, but they would probably do a webinar or something like that for you on it. Do you know of anybody who's used cyber liability insurance? I've never heard of it, a claim.
I know a couple of big companies found that they didn't get back what they spent in recovery. So I think the average intrusion is running around 2.5, 3 million now. So cybersecurity insurance that covers maybe 25, 50,000 is, you know, is it really worth going after the claim? I know a lot of it has to do with the agreement that you write with the insurance. Because they will look at negligence and, you know, are your is your JBoss version you know, 3 outdated, you know, 3 versions, or you know, are you still running systems that are no longer supported by those companies, and they will look at those. So you gotta, it's all about the agreement.
So to that vein, could you speak a little bit about this movement in healthcare to go to cloud solutions? Because, you know, one of the things that people are finding is that disaster recovery is better with a cloud solution. The updates on it are there. You know, they keep up on it. Now, most people don't know exactly where their cloud is actually hooked to. You might have a rough idea of where it is, but you know, it is something that our healthcare industry is moving to in a rather large and rapid rate, and so are there any special considerations that we should take into account for that?
That's why I'm here. You're the healthcare expert.
We had a report back in 2014 at Munson Healthcare by a vendor that actually rated cloud services. There's security ratings out there for them. So if you're going to put your data in the cloud, I would look to get some type of a security rating off of the cloud vendor. But on the other hand, if I'm not mistaken, Amazon had a breach here in the last 2 or 3 weeks that did involve some protected health information, and they're one of the biggest ones. So if they're not taking care of stuff, who is, right? I honestly think we're all going to be there. The only thing I know to do is, darn those business associate agreements. The other thing that we would do at Munson is, it's not something you want to flash publicly, but your reputational harm of a breach from a cloud provider is going to be much less if you actually have shared with your patients, they're entrusting you to the protected health information, that you're using them for some of your services. And it can be it can be something very simple, but I bet you every one of you has a cloud service that you're using some way, shape, or form. Even if it's just a simple conversation with the fact that, some of these older people don't get the fact that their data is going out there when you build their Medicare plan and stuff like that. But there's legitimate cloud services out there. So I personally think we're going to get a lot more cloud services going. I think that the stuff like the cloud access security brokers or people that actually look at the security, you're going to see those. Do the best you can for your your sourcing people to make sure that people can't just go and sign up or put stuff out there without business associate agreements. And I mean, I've had my identity stolen. So when you talk about the tax return thing, yeah, it took me to December. So, the stuff's all out there. I think you're going to find a lot more of it. I mean, I do. I don't know how we're going to avoid it, especially if you look at, like macro or meaningful use or things like that share the interoper, the standards and things like that. So even if you just have a conversation with your patients about that, then when a breach happens, not if, because that's what we say in my world. I don't know what you guys do, but when a breach happens, not if, then you've at least had an initial conversation. So it's probably not a very good answer to the question, but I think everything's going to be there.
We have another question on the chat. Ken, you had talked about logs and some people not even knowing them or not having them long enough. What's the best practice on how long you would keep your log files?
A year. If you have the ability, a year. Because most intrusions, they've been there for 220 days, I think, is on average. So before it's been identified that, bad guys are on your server. So 220 days is 7 and 8 months. So yeah, a year. So I'm going to want to know, when the recon started, and earlier in the logs, the better. But
okay. What other questions do we have?
I have one more. Ken, you said a breach is $2.5 to $3 million.
Yep.
IT budgets are going to be whatever they are. I mean, as much money as you can throw at it, you can spend it. So how do you sit down with leaders of the company and explain to them that money is a driving factor to decide how much security you can put through to get things better? How do you start? What's the conversation?
Yeah, it's management buy-in. That's how to get that started. What are your potential losses?
Right.
And then you can get into the whole risk impact if they want to look at it. But yeah, you gotta have buy-in. I could tell some stories on what I've seen, but I can't.
You wish you could.
So I've seen folks drop several $100,000 into a security breach, and then they put those same systems back online. So 3 months later, we're getting the phone call again. Well, what are you running? Oh yeah, Windows XP. You're running that 3 months ago, didn't you? Well, we had some services that needed to run XP. I mean, get your checkbook out. You're gonna write another one for 700,000. So.
So let's say you're doing everything right. You're doing like an annual risk assessment, you're doing pen tests, you're got, real-time intrusion detection. How likely is it that you're gonna get it? You've got all your patches up to date, everything. How likely is it that somebody's gonna still get in? Is it fairly likely?
How often are you being scanned? I mean, it's
Every minute?
what
Right now? I mean,
is,
I'm being honest.
you have to look at
Get on
these.
it right now.
You really have to look at.
We have
Yeah.
thousands of intrusions, pretty much at any time are being hit.
You really have to look at the APT, the actor. Like they are paid, just like we are, but they sit in front of a computer, a whole team of them, the size of this room or even larger, and their goal is to penetrate your network. So you've got nation state backing on some of these intrusions. They're not just criminals, and they're going to throw as much money as they can at getting into your system. So the harder you make it, the more difficult it is going to be. But
is it more likely they're going to get in on the social engineering and phishing side than if you've got everything blocked on the back end?
Yeah, the human is
Okay.
the most vulnerable person out there.
37%. The other thing for us is it's a big risk business decision. So, you can do a simple little, if you've ever seen the things like, what is the best product? I think it's Gartner that does it. Here's are the ones, here's the emerging ones and stuff like that. Put together a simple chart, okay? Take your square, divide it into 4. The ones that are in the upper quadrant are the ones you want to talk to management about. The ones that are going to be high profile, that are going to cost you a lot of money. The ones in the lower thing, are not going to. That's what you have to do. We have some organizations that have so many security tools. They're now doing studies to try and figure out which ones they want to get rid of because they can't manage them all. Right. So actually just, look at the whole risk thing. And then the other thing I encourage too is, how many people actually, people freak out when I tell them in a presentation, you are personally responsible for this. And you know what? If you do the wrong thing, you could be sitting in prison over this. And they look at you and they laugh. Well, if you can go and quote that right out of the HIPAA regulations, and you can quote that, it's the high-tech regulations, not the HIPAA ones, then they start to think a little bit differently about that. The information, the waiver form that we use was developed by, it might be the Department of Defense or something that was released. It was developed by a federal agency, might be the Department of Homeland Security. But I mean, seriously, we don't accept anything with less than a vice president or above if it doesn't meet the regulations coming in. Now, there's stuff out there we have right now that's not good, but you have to start someplace. So, when you sit down and have a conversation with those people, but that's the best way I know to do it is the risk thing, because they don't want to hear about the risk down here. So there's another question.
You don't necessarily have to spend money for protection. I mean, there's a lot of free tools out there that work really good. So
along the same lines, what would you say is the ratio of actual vulnerabilities that get exploited versus the human component?
It's probably, I see a lot of brute force. So, it's probably 80% human, 20% actual exploits, vulnerabilities.
It's back to that thing where people think that you can build your iron walls around, your iron technical walls around stuff. Well, you can't build iron technical walls. I mean, your data might be safe if you put it in the cave out here, right? But you can't. So, and it's processes that get you in trouble. It really is. I mean, they call me up. I just sent something to Blue Cross. It had 1,000 people's names on it, and I forgot to put secure on it. I forgot to encrypt it. Well, I'm telling you what, if we know it's Blue Cross or Priority or one of those, we encrypt them on the back end. We don't even give them the chance to do it. But you gotta have, it's a process thing.
And it's funny because we'll sit here in this room and we'll talk about security and the millions of dollars we're willing to spend. But we won't sit in this room and educate our coworker or our nurse or a doctor who literally is the reason why we're in this room talking about security.
Yeah, but you know, the other side of that is, and I have, my one daughter used to be a phlebotomist and she's now a nurse assistant. My husband actually works in he's a senior certified healthcare mechanic. So I see this all over the place, and that is those people barely have enough time to do what they can do right now. I mean, my daughter works on a critical care floor and she will say, Mom, you know, we've got 5 patients coming out of surgery. We've got 4 beds. I don't know what we're going to do about it. I mean, they're just trying to keep the people alive. So that's why one of the best approaches, and there's some stuff on the table back there, and University of Michigan does it, and they have summit every year in Cybersecurity Month. They want to teach people how to secure their devices at home, wanting that to float into the workplace. And so that's, you know, you almost have to get personal with some of those people. I hate to say it, but you almost have to get personal with them. Any other questions?
Last call for questions. We're out of questions in the chat box. So first of all, I want to thank our presenters. I think it's a lot of good information. You know, I also want to thank Paula and PHP for hosting us here and having us, and for all of you that came. So, you know, again, as part of the Michigan chapter of HIMSS, you know, we're trying to do a better job of outreach to our communities, to people that are members, and some of you I suspect are members, some of you might not be. So we'd like to have you join and become members. There's some information in the back there. I'll put some of my cards out, or grab me at the reception later. We could talk about how to do that. Also they keep mentioning this mythical unicorn person, Dara. Dara Barrera is the program's chair for Michigan chapter, and Dara is the person who helped pull together this whole presentation for us. So Dara, I know you're out there, so let's give Dara a round of applause. And for the MSMS insurance program, who has cybersecurity insurance, there's information about that out there as well. So thank you very much. You know, I would just encourage you to, you know, get involved. You know, get involved with HIMSS, help us. There's a ton of HIMSS resources around cybersecurity and lots of other things that are available to you as members. So it can be a good resource for you to help do your jobs. So a reminder, Holiday Inn down the street here. I think we're running a little bit early, but they should be ready for us by the time we get down there. Just a little happy hour to thank you all for coming, a little networking, you know, for people. So please come and join us. Otherwise, we got a lot of food and drinks. So thank you all for coming out. Appreciate it.
Is anyone going to want a card?
Thank you very much. Yep.
Sure. I wrote it.
Yes, I just emailed you several.
I didn't see the info card.
I can't even spell it right. Is it infer or info?
Infra.
Infra, okay, well, I can do that.
Yeah, and you have to, I signed up back in May and I did not get my approval until September.
Okay, so I just answered